David had an e-commerce business who had his work life pretty dialed in, but his personal life felt like complete chaos. The problem was that even the simplest things at home took him forever. Every time David had a vacation coming up, packing would turn into an exhausting all-day event. He'd open his suitcase and start throwing in things. Then he'd stop to figure out what the weather would actually be like. Then he'd pull out to start over, only to realize that he needed some dressy clothes, which completely changed his mind about what shoes he would bring. By the time he was done, David felt like he'd been running a marathon instead of packing for a 4-day trip. The same thing happened when he tried to clean his apartment. He'd start organizing his closet. Then he'd stop to decide if he should donate his clothing first. In the process, he'd start getting distracted, figuring out the best way to fold his shirts. Then he'd restart with a different system entirely. David told me he was spending entire weekend on basic life stuff and felt mentally wiped out from his tasks that shouldn't even be hard. What David didn't realize was that his brain was drowning in details without ever stopping back to see the big picture or the details within that picture. By improving one thinking skill, David shifted in how it approached tasks. David now breezes through everything from meal planning to home projects without the mental exhaustion. He has time on weekends to relax and to tackle his to do list. If you're experiencing something similar, I'm here to tell you you do not have to struggle forever. Hey there, I'm Esty Rappaport, and on this episode of the Business Brain Podcast, I'm going to share with you the exact steps of what you can do to have your own transformation. But first, which of your thinking skills is the strongest, and which thinking skills need some help? Find out by taking the Thinking Skills Assessment for free at lifepixuniversity.com/CF.
While you are doing any task, you, without even realizing it, are using your 28 thinking skills. When the thinking skills you need to use are strong, doing the task happens easily. Skills you need to use are weak, doing the task becomes a challenge.
The struggle that David had came from a weak thinking skill of summing up. Summing up is about counting up the details needed to do a task. David's brain was getting lost in endless micro decisions because it couldn't step back and see how many things were actually involved. His packing situation. His brain was processing weather, activities, dressy versus casual, shoes, toiletries, electronics, documents, length of trip, luggage size, but he stepped back to say, okay, this is a 4-day business trip to Chicago in March. That's just 4 days of meetings, 2 days of traveling, and potentially 3 nights of chilling. Once you sum up the situation, everything becomes way clearer. I did 3 exercises with David to help him get better at summing up. All of them you can do at home by yourself. Number one, super simple. Before you start a task, list out loud the elements of the task. Before cleaning his apartment, David would take a moment to observe and list out the tasks he sees. I see books everywhere, dirty dishes, clothing on the floor, and papers on my desk. 4 main areas, and the goal is to have a clean, organized space to relax. His brain was able to calm down, knowing exactly what it was dealing with. If your brain gets overwhelmed because it feels like there's way too many steps, well, then number two is for you. Number two, after you count the elements, because sometimes it's going to be a lot more than four, ask yourself, explain the main point of this task in one sentence. What would it be? For David's apartment cleaning, it was, I want a space where I can relax without stuff everywhere. That's it. Everything else is just details supporting that core idea. When you do both one and two, then your brain can start seeing the details and the bigger picture. Which brings us to number three, which is about the future. After you finish any task, write down all the details that were actually involved. David started doing this and realized that packing for business trips involved 12 specific things. Now his brain knows what to expect and doesn't get overwhelmed because he's prepared for those 12 elements. When it comes to cleaning his apartment, there is 9 specific elements, and his brain knows he has to just go through these 9 processes. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like it would slow me down even more. And that's exactly what David thought. But what he discovered was that those 2 minutes spent counting and identifying the core purpose saved him a ton of hours of spinning in circle. That vacation packing that used to take him all day, now it takes him 45 minutes because his brain isn't getting lost in every micro decision. And no, this isn't about lists. It's about training your brain to automatically see the details in the picture without losing sight of the bigger picture so you can work more efficiently. About a month after finishing Optimize Your ADHD Brain, David had a launch of a completely new product line. He messaged me to let me know that not only was it his most successful launch, it was even his smoothest, simply because he found himself working smarter by counting the details up front. So even though he began working on summing up because of his home life, it ended up improving his business life also. When your brain struggles with summing up, even simple tasks feel overwhelming because you don't know what information you actually need. Your action steps this week is to improve summing up with the following. Number one, before you start a task, count out loud the elements of the task. Number two, say the main idea of the task in one sentence so you don't get overwhelmed by all the amount of steps. And number three, after finishing the task, write down all the details that were involved so your brain learns what to expect and start seeing patterns over and over again. As your brain gets better at summing up, you stop getting lost in details and start seeing clear solutions. Tasks that used to drain your energy become manageable because you now know exactly what you're dealing with.
That's all for this episode of the Business Brain Podcast. If you enjoyed it, send it to a friend who secretly wants stronger thinking skills too, so together you can grow your businesses with peak brain performance.